Hello again. Right, so this book is a classic. If I forgot to say so in the first video, it was first published in 1972. I've just recently ordered the 50th anniversary edition off of eBay, which has got some extra content and different images apparently in that, so that'll be interesting to get a hold of that. This is not a review, it's just highlighting one chapter in particular, which will only help to sell this book. Like every time I read from other people's books, it's usually it's usually with one key example, it's usually just one chapter, and it's obvious how this chapter relates to this channel. And hello, Seth. 4, visualization and the training of a magician. I'm going to keep my headphones on actually because they pick up the sound. There's a mic. It's just easier. So I know I look like a doofus, but we'll have to get by. So just sit back, close your eyes, and just enjoy this this very concise and compacted dive into the imagination in David Conway's Magic and Occult Primer. The simplest way of explaining what visualization involves in magic is to say that it is a pictorial rather than a verbal way of thinking. It is said that children think in pictorial terms, forming what psychologists call eidetic images in their mind. What the occultist must do is recapture this ability, which was natural to him before the shades of the prison house began to dim his imagination. But thought building does not stop here, for in magic your mind must be trained to create images that seem real not only in visual terms, but in terms of all the other senses as well. Thus, an imagined sprig of lavender must both look and smell real. Likewise, if when you have sufficient experience you decide to visualize a seashore, you must also be able to hear the waves beating on it, feel the cool spray on your face, and taste the tang of brine around your lips. However, unless you are gifted with an uncommonly vivid imagination, this ability is one that can be acquired only through strenuous and occasionally wearisome practice. We in the West have always been inclined to shirk mental discipline, preferring to leave that sort of thing to the contemplative Orient, where meditation is an integral part of daily life and a means to that supreme enlightenment which the Buddha managed to attain. The regular performance of the daily salutations will go some way to training your mind, but other exercises are necessary to complete the training. When you decide to start your mental training, you must set aside a few minutes each day for visualization practice. 15 minutes is quite long enough, and as little as 5 will do. It is far better to keep up 5 minutes each day than have much longer but irregular sessions. The morning has always been regarded as the best time for meditation, allegedly because the earth currents, whatever they may be, are waxing until noon, are on the wane between then and midnight. If you can, use some quiet room where you can meditate without being exposed to distracting influences. Make yourself as comfortable as possible. Some occultists can flop happily into a spectacular yogic asana, the well-known lotus posture being one of their favorites. But unless your limbs are extraordinarily supple, you would be well advised to content yourself with sitting down normally. Choose a straight-backed armchair and rest your elbows on its arms, in the position in which the Egyptian pharaohs are commonly depicted. It is sometimes recommended that one sit with hands clasped and feet crossed in order, it is said, to keep the body circuit closed and so prevent any wastage of psychic energy. There is no harm in trying it if you want to. Having settled in your chair, you must now endeavour to liberate your body from all tensions. To do this, some experts suggest a thing called moon breathing, which involves breathing through the left nostril and repeating the word Om. A more down-to-earth method is to start deliberately relaxing every muscle in your body from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. If, with the best will in the world, you still cannot relax, then lie flat on the floor and try there. At the same time, close your eyes and picture yourself floating in a dark and silent void. After a few minutes like this, provided you have not dropped off to sleep in the meantime, you should be able to return to your chair and resume the relaxation process with fresh courage. When at last you do feel completely relaxed, avoid the temptation to start daydreaming. Instead, will your brain and body to adopt a state of alertness. On the first few occasions, this may cause you to tense up once more, in which case you must start again from the beginning. A wise precaution against this is to breathe very slowly and deeply while you are trying to relax, and then accelerate your breathing once you wish to effect the transition to a state of alertness. The quicker rhythm, while preserving your body from renewed tension, should induce the mental and nervous alertness you seek. At no time in your magical training, however, should you alter your breathing habits too drastically, since the increased oxygenization of your blood, though beneficial in the long run, can also have some alarming side effects if it occurs suddenly. The next step is to get down to image building proper. Start by studying a simple two-dimensional diagram and then, with eyes closed, form a mental reproduction of it. Do not be afraid to open your eyes to check the real thing against any portion of your mental picture that may be insufficiently clear, and keep on checking until the diagram held in your mind corresponds exactly with that drawn on the sheet of paper. Once you are able to perform this type of exercise without difficulty, you are ready to graduate to three-dimensional objects. Again, your aim should be to form a mental picture like the original. You may find that it helps at first if you project your image of the object onto an imaginary lighted screen inside your mind. A variation of the exercise, which will test your powers of memory, is to look for a minute or so at some small objects arranged at random on a tray, and then, with your eyes closed, give a detailed description of each object. You may recall that this was the game described by Rudyard Kipling in his novel Kim. Another fascinating challenge, once you have become fairly expert at visualization, is mentally to examine the object visualized from several different points of view. Let us suppose you have visualized an empty matchbox. Your mind's eye sees the box exactly as it earlier presented itself to your physical eye. Now visualize the same matchbox from various other angles, above, below, etc. Whatever the viewpoint, the matchbox should be as clear and detailed as the original mental photograph, which in turn should be as clear and detailed as the matchbox that was physically observed. From here, some people are able to go one step further and actually transfer their consciousness to inside the matchbox, or even visualize it from all points of view at the same time. If this proves to be beyond you at this stage, a slightly easier exercise is to project your consciousness to different parts of the room you are in, so that you get a completely different view from the one presented to your physical vision. You could possibly try this experiment next time you find yourself at a dull party or lecture. It may even help pass the time on a tedious journey, provided, of course, you are not in the driving seat. In view of its importance in magic, colour must be visualized with special ease, and this too requires practice. Start by visualizing one of the primary colors, say red. For the purpose of this exercise, do not visualize neat little rows of red pillar boxes or tins of red paint. Simply flood your mind with the color itself. When your mind is a sea of red, allow the color to change slowly to orange. Again, do not visualize orange objects, but the color itself. When you have filled your mind with orange, let that color change to yellow, then yellow to green, green to blue, and so on. The absence of forms to visualize makes this one of the more difficult exercises to master. There still remains the task of involving the other senses in your thought building. Fortunately, some of the visualization exercises can be adapted for this purpose. Smell and taste, for example, may be reproduced by visualizing suitable images. A good hot curry is an excellent one to start with. You can then go on to develop the sense of touch by imagining yourself soaking up the warm sunshine on a Mediterranean beach. As for hearing, a useful way to begin is to strike a tuning fork and then continue the note in your mind for as long as possible. From here you can progress to more ambitious things. Up to now, your image building will have been entirely subjective, and as such scarcely differs from the type of concentration taught in many schools of meditation. The secret of magical visualization, however, is that the chosen image is not just locked away inside the mind, but is projected into the real world. This projection is a knack which, like learning to swim, will be acquired all of a sudden, but you should not attempt it until you have perfected subjective visualization. When you are ready, open your eyes while still retaining your mental picture in all its detail. Eventually, you will discover that because of a subtle collusion between your mind and your vision, you are able to see the mental picture just as if it were part of your normal physical surroundings. One thing to guard against, however, especially in the first flush of success, is the tendency for such mental images to impose themselves on your everyday vision without your willing them to do so. Resist this firmly. Throughout your magical training, you should allow things to happen only when you wish them to. Involuntary hallucinations belong to the realm of mental illness, not magic. By the time you can objectify mental images of such clarity that they appear to possess an empirical reality of their own, you will be well advanced on the way to magical attainment. Exercises are always a chore, but in this case they are very necessary if you are later to derive any benefit from your magical operations. But, of course, magic would scarcely be magic if it did not provide some little assistance to lighten the burden. What it offers, however, is not a shortcut but merely a crutch to help you along what can, at times, seem an arduous path. A great deal of help can be obtained by performing a short and simple rite known as the Kabbalistic Cross. This has nothing at all to do with the Cross of Calvary or the Christian devotion known as the Sign of the Cross. The glyph of the cross is much older than Christianity and was held sacred by ancient civilizations as far apart as Egypt and Mexico, where it was adored as a symbol of, among other deities, Tlaloc, the god of rain, and Quetzalcoatl, lord of the four winds. In Scandinavia too, long before the birth of Christ, a cross was used to mark the burial places of dead kings and heroes. Indeed, its adoption as a symbol by the Christian Church occurred quite late in our era. Before then, the monogram, and there's the diagram of the X and the P, the one that was painted on the shields, Constantine, that whole thing. Before then, the monogram, see it in your mind, had been favoured. Just need a drink before I carry on. Oh, whoops. To make the Kabbalistic Cross, stand upright and visualize a splendid cloud of light above your head. This is the Ketheric light that crowns the tree of glory against which you can, if you like, imagine yourself to be standing. Now raise your right hand to touch the light and, drawing some of it down towards you, place your middle finger on your forehead, saying the word Ater. With the light still cascading upon you, move your finger to your solar plexus, saying Malkuth. As you do so, picture more light surging up from the earth beneath you, so that a band of light now extends from your head to your feet. Next, touch your right shoulder, and say Vegabura, and then, with your finger still trailing a stream of white light, touch your left shoulder and say Vegadula. Gadula is an alternative name for Hesod. The form of the cross is now complete, and folding your hands, you may speak the final words, which are Le Olam Amen. It is not absolutely essential to use these Hebrew expressions rather than their English equivalent, but constant usage has endowed them with a special efficacy, much of which is due to the acoustic vibrations that occur when they are spoken aloud. The effect of such vibrations is discussed in chapter 5. What the words themselves mean is, Thou art, Ater, the kingdom, Malkuth, and the power, Vegabura, and the glory, Vegadula, unto all the ages, Le Olam. Amen. While your hands are still clasped in an attitude of prayer, imagine the 4 branches of the visualized cross stretching outwards through space and yourself growing with them to a tremendous size. If it makes things easier, shut your eyes and imagine that you are poised over the universe with the stars at your feet. A few seconds of this vertiginous contemplation will be enough, and you should gently let your body contract to its normal physical dimensions. We shall be using the Kabbalistic Cross as a preliminary to many magical operations, so it is well to learn how to do it properly. It should never become formalistic. It should never become a formalistic touching of head, chest, and shoulders, accompanied by the appropriate words. The astral light which you channel into your body when making the cross will assist you greatly in your visualization exercises. It will also help if you imagine, while still surrounded or rather transfused by the Ketheric radiance, that you hold in your right hand a gleaming sword pointing upwards. This is the sword of power, your Excalibur, and it is your symbolic defense against evil and aggression. Now stretch the sword out horizontally and draw a circle all around you. As you do so, imagine a jet of gold and silver fire emanating from the tip of the sword, so that by turning full circle you have in effect surrounded yourself with a fiery barrier. This will serve to exclude those alien psychic forces that might interfere with your meditation. For remember that the power of thought is such that your symbolic gesture has created an astral barrier which is no less real for not being physical. After all this effort, you should feel relaxed enough to sit down and commence your visualization practice. At this point, when your visualization is still little more than an academic exercise, we ought perhaps to decide once and for all what is the true nature of the forms you will be visualizing when eventually you begin your magical work. It will help if we at once plant our feet firmly on the ground and assert that the visualized images, though apparently real in themselves, are in fact no more than representations of an imperceptible reality. We shall find that the best argument in favour of this concealed reality comes from practical experience, where results alone count. These results will demonstrate that while the forms themselves may have no phenomenal existence, they nevertheless have an extrinsic value of their own. Extrinsic. In this respect, they can be compared with a £5 note, which derives its worth not from the paper on which it is printed, but from what it represents in terms of credit with the Bank of England. The same is true of the seemingly concrete shapes we shall visualize when we contact the astral world. By treating these as if they enjoyed an objective existence outside our consciousness, we are able to take advantage of the specialized forces they represent. For practical purposes, therefore, it is as unnecessary to question their immediate validity as it is to doubt the credit promised by the chief cashier of the Bank of England on every £5 note we handle. But even if the results obtained enable us to postulate the reality behind the astral forms, not everyone will be convinced. In any case, there is always the risk that the results obtained in the early days of your magical career will be too meagre to inspire much confidence in the astral forms you are using. And without confidence, it is unlikely that the results will ever improve. Before we discuss the nature of these forms, we must first concede that the astral world is incompatible with the old-fashioned materialistic viewpoint, which accepts matter as the sole criterion of reality. Fortunately, few materialists nowadays would go this far anyway, and most have already abandoned their former simple faith in matter as something characterized by mass and occupation of space. Instead, modern physics is having to contend with wonders like non-causal effects, irreducible uncertainty, and something which, for want of a better word, has been dubbed antimatter. Compared with these, the astral planes are indeed simple stuff. Even so, it remains a fact that these planes, like much else in the universe, are as yet inaccessible both to our senses and to the most refined scientific instruments. Yet to infer from this that they do not exist would be to adopt the premise that reality depends for its existence on our awareness of it. This is clearly untenable. The trouble with the astral world is not its unreality, since the results of magic prove that it is real enough, but its inaccessibility to our senses. But telepathy has already shown that the human mind is not entirely dependent on the senses for the information it receives. I know that telepathy is fast becoming a peg on which to hang all sorts of occult hats. But the most we are doing here is inferring from it that the mind can in certain circumstances receive direct impressions from agents outside itself. This faculty, call it extrasensory perception, psi, or anything you like, is what enables us to become aware of the astral world. The mechanics of this awareness are best explained if we think of the mind as a mirror in which images are reflected. Most of these images are due to the reaction of one or more of our sense organs, but it is still the mind that does most of the work. This is what Aristotle meant when he declared that the words "I see" really mean "I have seen," for the mind has in this case intervened to sort out whatever impressions were made on the optic nerve. Because of this, the mind can be described as the surface on which is reflected the reality known to us by experience. Like the celebrated Lady or Charlotte, we behold the outside world in a looking glass, and like Tennyson's heroine, we need only change the angle of the glass for it to reflect new and hitherto unsuspected things. This is exactly what visualization is intended to achieve. It is the tilting of our mental mirror to accommodate new images derived from the astral world. Oh, I need some water. Right. When our mind perceives these images, they appear to be as solid and three-dimensional as any received via the senses. But no one is naive enough nowadays to believe that lions, snakes and knights in armour populate the astral planes. We see such things because our subconscious has translated the non-pictorial impressions it has directly received into objective forms recognizable by the mind. It does this because the mind would otherwise be incapable of appreciating them, so accustomed it is to receiving only sensory impressions. It is the old adage, nihil in intellectu est quod non prius en sensu erat. Whatever. To this extent, any magical image we visualize may be said to be subjective. It is, after all, our subconscious that has created it for us. On the other hand, the image is at the same time a reflection of something else, and so may be said to have an objective existence as well. Excuse me. Thus, when we subjectively visualize an astral form, we make an image which has as its subject an objective astral force. We may say we are accepting at one and the same time both the subjectivity of the object and the objectivity of the subject. All that remains to be considered is the appearance of the forms themselves. The attribution of particular forms to different cosmic principles occurred very early in the history of mankind. In that time, which witnessed the dawn of magic, it seemed only reasonable to anthropomorphize the forces discernible behind natural phenomena. These traditional personifications survive to this day and bear the stamp of their primitive origin. The pity is that the rather simplicity, psychology does actually say that, simplicity in italics, psychology behind them has tended to obscure the merits of the system. Yet its very antiquity is also its strength, for the traditional forms have by now become part of what Jung would call the collective unconscious. As this collective unconscious is by definition something much larger than the individual unconscious, it follows that at some point the forms we visualize merge into larger forms which have an existence outside ourselves. These are what the Jungians would call a racial memory, although occultists prefer to describe them as etheric thought forms. Because of them, the forms we visualize are only partly self-induced, since they take on the appearance of astral forms already in existence. We may say in conclusion, therefore, that although any astral lions, snakes, or knights in armour we may visualize are not quite the real thing, they are certainly as near as damn it. Yeah, wonderful book. Very much of its time. Well, it's an exceptional book of its time. And I was just saying to a friend yesterday, actually, in a text, he was looking for a little bit of inspiration, because sometimes it doesn't matter how much you love a chosen subject or, path, interest, endeavour. It can get old, and sometimes you need to find ways of refreshing your enthusiasm. So the condensed accessibility, I'm trying to think of the right word, because it's not kitsch enough, it's not new age enough, it's very clever. It's so well written, although you might say it's too simple, but saying that, it just does what it says on the tin, an occult primer. It's a perfect occult primer. It's exactly what it needs to be to speak to someone, like myself back in the day, who knew nothing, but his own strange experiences. And it's a bit like you get something good, where it goes wrong, because it ticks so many boxes, you're able to forgive the points where it strays or goes too far. And there was something else I was going to say. I remembered as I was reading. Always when you're on the spot, as soon as I turn this off, it will come to me. It's gone, isn't it? I said, didn't I? It was published 1970. Yeah, because I said the 50th edition. See, because I had to make the first video twice. As always, Broderick Wallace channel, completely unprofessional, and always will be. It's part of the charm. You see, you forgive me, because of all the meaty content that I have delivered. When I go astray, when I go too far, it's forgivable, right? So I've just made my point. Right, cool.